Hi guys, Dan here from Canada Abroad, and thanks so much for tuning in. Today we're bringing you important changes to the International Student Study Program for Canada. So anybody looking to study in Canada is going to be facing a few changes this year as announced by IRCC. Not all of these changes, unfortunately, are positive, depending on who you speak with, but for students, it's going to affect those looking to obtain a new study permit. So a lot of these changes are not affecting people who are already in Canada on study permits or looking to get extensions. It appears that most of these changes are going to apply to people who are applying for new study permits. So the first change that they're going to be implementing is there's going to be a cap on the number of study permits issued this year and next year as well. So for this year, they're only going to be issuing a total of 360,000 study permits. So that's a decrease of 35% from last year. In addition to the federal cap, what's going to be happening is each province is going to be given a quota. So how many students can go to each province, and those quotas are going to be based on the populations of each province. So Quebec and Ontario should be getting the bigger quotas, but they haven't released the exact numbers yet for that. So what's going to be happening is when you're applying for your new study permit, so your initial study permit, again, not for extensions, the quota does not apply to extensions. So when you apply for a study permit going forward, you're going to be getting an attestation letter from your school that you'll have to present with your study permit application. So this is another document they're going to need to get in addition to that letter of acceptance that you're going to need when applying for your study permits. So that change was being implemented as of yesterday, January 22nd, 2024. But they did note that they expect the provinces to have all of this in order by March. So you, depending on when you're anticipating starting school, there may be a delay where you're waiting for some documents. So most people, they started a semester in January. The next one won't be until May. So hopefully this won't affect students too terribly who are hoping to get into that summer semester before the fall semester starts in September. The next big change, which is going to affect quite a few people looking at coming to Canada, is the eligibility for spousal open work permits. So traditionally, many students, if they were coming to Canada, their spouses would be eligible for a spousal open work permit that was issued for the same duration as their spouse's study permit. Going forward, spousal open work permits will only be eligible if your spouse is studying in a master's or a PhD program. So that is a huge change in eligibility for people hoping to get those work permits. The next change is changes to the Postgraduate Open Work Permit program. Now, there's a few things noted here. The first one is we have seen 3 occasions where they've extended postgraduate work permits by 18 months to certain people. They have confirmed they're not going to be doing that again. So if you're hoping for one of those extensions to be happening in 2024, they have said they are not going to be doing it again. Now, a really good change for some applicants is the fact that people who are studying at a master's level or higher, then their postgraduate work permits are now going to be for 3 years. Whereas before it was strictly based on duration. So, if you did a 1-year master's program, you got a 1-year postgraduate work permit. Now, if you complete your master's, you're going to get a 3-year postgraduate open work permit. So that is good news for some of those students. Then they said that starting September 1st, 2024, so not quite yet, that any international student who starts their study program September 1st onwards, it's part of a curriculum licensing arrangement that they will no longer be eligible for postgraduate work permits. So under curriculum licensing agreements, students physically attend a private college that has been licensed to deliver the curriculum of an associated public college. So those will no longer be eligible for the postgraduate open work permits. Now, these changes come on the heels of other changes that have been happening in the last few months. One of those notably was the increase in cost of living that applicants had to show with their study permit applications. And this isn't a bad thing. I think a lot of people, when they saw the cost of living, they had an idea of what it was going to cost them to live in Canada, which was quite inaccurate. Previously, if you were a single international student coming by yourself, you had to show $10,000 for your living costs for your first year. Well, that hasn't been updated in over a decade, so the cost of living has obviously increased. So what they've done now is they've increased that cost of living that you need to show with your application, and they will be updating it yearly as the cost of living goes up as well. So now a single international student applying for their study permit needs to show $20,635 Canadian, and that's in addition to their first year of tuition and enough money for a return plane ticket to Canada and back. They have said that certain designated learning institutions will be favored in 2024. So students going to these preferred institutions might get expedited processing times. They haven't listed them yet, but my gut feeling is saying these are going to be some of your, basically your universities, your major universities like UBC, SFU, UVic, Queen's, University of Toronto, McGill, Dalhousie. So your bigger universities are probably going to have preference for their students because they are likely going to be these organizations. The public policy that was in place that allowed students to work full-time on their study permits is going to be ending. So that was put in place and it is in effect until April 30th of this year. After that, students will only be able to work the normal 20 hours per week on their study permits and then full-time during the holidays. And then the other change that they had made was the eligibility of online learning contributing to your post-graduation open work permit. This was obviously with COVID and things like that they had to make some changes. But what they've said is that for students who are starting their program September 1st, 2024 and onwards, the online learning component is no longer going to contribute to the calculation of your postgraduate open work permit. So thank you guys as always for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with all the latest Canadian immigration news and updates.